In this video, I'm going to cover everything you need to know about sauna ventilation, and this video will be divided to 3 different parts. Firstly, why do you need to ventilate your sauna to begin with? Secondly, what happens if you don't ventilate your sauna? And thirdly, how to actually ventilate your sauna based on your unique situation. If you know that you need to ventilate your sauna, you know why you need to ventilate your sauna, and you just want the instructions on how to actually do that, we will put the timestamps down there so you can just select and skip directly to the action. Who am I? My name is Veeti, I'm a Finnish sauna expert, and since starting my business in 2022, I have helped over 1,000 US-based sauna builders successfully make their sauna dreams come true. So why do you need to ventilate your sauna to begin with? Saunas are a lot like people. They are living and breathing organisms, which means if you want to have fun in the sauna, you absolutely need to ventilate it. Unfortunately, especially in the US, it is the most neglected and misunderstood part of sauna construction. Saunas without proper ventilation create a risk for your health, which is ironic because you go to sauna to receive some health benefits in the first place. Why do saunas create a risk for your health if they're not ventilated? Getting a bunch of people buttoned up in a room without ventilation, especially in a sauna setting where you sweat and your heart rate raises, quickly results in very high levels of exhaled CO2, which is toxic for humans. Removal of excess CO2 is the main reason for ventilation. There is a reason why one of the favorite cliches in murder mysteries and horror movies is helpless victims locked into a sauna with no ventilation. And to state the obvious, you can't just open your sauna door and think that this will create some ventilation for your sauna, or that you will get enough ventilation when you go in and out of the sauna once in a while. So if you leave the door open, you are just wasting all your money and heating the other world, plus your sauna wouldn't get to the temperature. Or if you just open it when you go in and you think that enough oxygen comes in there, that's simply untrue. Otherwise, all the hot and humid, the best air would escape from your sauna. A post-workout sauna in poorly ventilated sauna room may cause more harm than any health because of carbon dioxide that inhibits your recovery. So here is a checklist for your sauna to have the best ventilation without taking the roof of it. So ventilation and heating help maintain a comfortable indoor climate during use, as we have talked about. After a sauna use, proper ventilation means that the space dries, so excess humidity gets exhausted, so your sauna doesn't rust and rot. Because if you would go to the sauna, throw a lot of water onto your sauna heater, and then you wouldn't have ventilation, the water and the humidity would stay in the sauna very, very long time, which would result in rot and decay in your sauna construction. Ventilation ensures that your sauna stove, if you have a wood-fired heater, gets enough combustion air, because there is nothing more useless than a cold sauna. Your sauna's indoor climate should have the following vital statistics. So the air temperature at head height should be between 70 to 100 Celsius, or for my US customers, 158 up to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity in a proper Finnish sauna should be 40 to 70 grams of water vapor per kilogram of air. Heat radiation should be evenly distributed from all directions to bathers. So it's said that in best saunas, if you close your eyes, you shouldn't be able to tell where the heat source actually is. So that's how equal the temperatures in your sauna should be, and that's how they are when you have correctly sized sauna heater and your sauna is properly ventilated. The temperature of the surfaces above the benches should be close to the sauna's actual air temperature, and proper ventilation ensures that this is the case. I own a company called the Saunaheater, or thesaunaheater.com, and we sell the highest quality sauna equipment in the USA. Whether you need a full-blown Finnish sauna, a sauna heater, or any equipment for your sauna construction project, we got you covered. Head to www.thesaunaheater.com and you can chat or call our experts, me included, and we will help you select the best possible gear for your sauna project. Now let's get back to the video. So why the surfaces above the benches would be unequally heated if your sauna is badly ventilated? Well, the reason is that hot air is lighter than cold air, so hot air is always going to rise up and cold air is going to plummet to the bottom. Your sauna heater's temperature sensor, when you have an electric sauna heater, is going to be close to the roof of the sauna. And when the temperature sensor shows that you have reached the temperature that you are aiming for, the sauna heater will shut off and continue heating only once the temperature drops. So it might be that you have a small layer of hot air where your temperature sensor is, and the sauna heater turns off, but the air is not moving because you have no ventilation. Material such as wood that you probably use in your sauna surfaces has modest thermal capacity, but it takes some time for the wood to actually heat up, and it needs the room to be evenly heated all around in order for that wood to get into comfortable heat. So that's why you need to ventilate, because then the air is circulating and the heater won't stop heating the sauna when you have just small strip of hot air on top of your sauna, but otherwise your sauna is cold. So now we get to the second part of this video. What happens if you don't ventilate your sauna at all? I will speed through this, but I will just give you a little bit of information what happens if you don't heat your sauna. If you don't ventilate your sauna at all, there will be very unequal temperatures. So just as I explained, there will be hot air hanging on top of the sauna and cold air on the lower levels of the sauna. This will lead to bacteria growth, because when you have 190 degrees Fahrenheit, which might be a temperature that you are aiming for on the roof level, on your basically foot bench level you might have like 120 or 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and bacteria dies at 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So the temperature level in the whole sauna should be above 140, otherwise your lower foot bench will be optimal environment for bacteria to grow that will be harmful for your health. Your feet will feel colder than your head during the sauna going if you don't have ventilation that would circulate the air inside the sauna, and this leads your body trying to heat up your lower body and cool down your head. So you don't go to sauna to fry your head, and if that's what happens during your sauna session, you will also lose all of the health benefits that you get from sauna going. And then the sauna surfaces are unevenly heated, so when you close your eyes you can definitely point that the heater is there, and it feels very unequal and unpleasant if you don't have ventilation. If you don't have ventilation, your sauna won't dry after the sauna usage, so it will stay humid for a long time, and this will lead to rot and decay and your sauna construction getting damaged, and also mold growing in the sauna, which will lead to more damages to your health. Your stones won't get hot enough because you're confusing your sensors if you don't have ventilation. So sauna heaters work in a way that if you set a goal that you want your sauna to heat up to 190 degrees Fahrenheit, let's say, and now I'm talking about electric heaters, when it shows that around the area where your temperature sensor is, it's 190 degrees Fahrenheit, your sauna heater will completely shut off. And when the temperature drops few points, then the sauna heater will turn on again. But if the air is not moving, the upper layer of your sauna where you have your temperature sensor will reach your desired temperature very quickly, and the sauna heater will turn off. But the sauna stones that are inside your sauna heater have high thermal capacity, and they need a lot of time to actually absorb the heat, so they can then radiate the heat towards the sauna goers. So if you don't get your stones to a bathing temperature, your sauna will feel like a microwave and very unequally heated. This is also why you can't actually oversize your sauna heater or undersize, and this is also why it takes any case, if you want to build a proper sauna, you need to let it heat up 45 to 55 minutes before it's ready regardless. So the stones being too cold will actually lead to bad, and löyly is the steamy air that comes when you throw water onto the sauna heater. Lastly, we will go over some special situation and some special consideration regarding having an open mesh sauna heater or a closed case sauna heater. Then we will have some extra consideration for wood stoves, and then we will have discussion about ventilation duct material requirements. This applies to all ventilation regardless of your situation. So you want to take fresh air, so the incoming air to your sauna should come from outdoors, because we want this air to have high levels of oxygen and low levels of CO2 to begin with. If you take your intake air from the room next to your sauna room, if you have an indoor sauna or wherever, if it's like used air, it won't help you much. So you want to take your intake air always from outdoors. And when it comes to exhaust air, you also want to exhaust that to outdoors or to a safe place, because the air that escapes sauna is hot and humid. So if you let this just escape to your house structures uncontrollably, your house will rot and decay and it will cause damages to your house structures. So you want to be careful with bringing air from outdoors and bringing the air from sauna to outside. So always take air from outside and bring the air to outside. Also, make sure that you don't recirculate the same air inside your sauna room. So that's not actually very helpful, because we want to bring down the CO2 levels. So you exhale CO2 at a rapid rate when you are at the sauna, and especially when you have loads of people at the sauna. So we want to get rid of that CO2. So actually just circulating the same air inside the sauna, it will equalize the temperatures, yes, but it won't help with having more oxygen to breathe. So when you really have to get out of the sauna, it's because the CO2 levels are way too high. There is a situation where you can actually exhaust your sauna air to your bathroom. So if your bathroom area already has a mechanical exhaust ventilation that brings the air from your bathroom that is hot and humid as well, at least humid. If that already brings the air outside of your house, then you can exhaust your basically sauna air to the same system, no problem. So if you're lucky, you have that and you know that, but this is only with integrated indoor saunas. So when you have a sauna, regardless of what kind of sauna it is, you're always going to have one vent in the same place. So you're going to have adjustable exhaust vent on the roof. So this should be adjustable. And the reason for that is this is only for drying. So the vent that you place on your ceiling or very high on the wall, usually opposite to the sauna heater's location, this is just for drying. So you will keep this closed during your sauna going, and only when you want to get rid of some excess heat and humidity, you will open it up. But typically, at least when I go to my sauna, I open this vent only after the sauna going. But regardless of what kind of heater you're going to have one drying vent here on the roof. And it should always be adjustable, closed during the sauna going, and then you will open it after just to dry your room more effectively. When you have an electric sauna heater, the exhaust vent, so the main exhaust vent, not this drying vent we will have on the roof. The main exhaust vent is always recommended to be under your foot bench. So in great saunas, you have multiple levels of benches. So you have a bench for your feet, and then you have a bench where you actually sit. So sitting bench, whatever. So the exhaust vent in an electric sauna, in the best case scenario, it's always going to be under this foot bench. So let's say somewhere here, your sauna heater would be here. And the reason for that is that the hot air travels from the sauna heater. It wants to go towards the roof. And remember, this is closed vent right now. And then it goes out from here. So then this basically equalizes the temperatures in your sauna and makes the löyly, the steam and the hot air run through your body, which will make your feet and your head equally warm. So you need this only in electric saunas. So in electric saunas, this vent is recommended to be mechanical. So basically run by a machinery. Well, why is that? So it will make sure that the air actually moves. It will force the air out from here, because otherwise it's possible that in electric saunas the hot air doesn't want to come down from the roof level. So when you have very simple mechanical ventilation machine on this vent and the air is forced out, some air will also be forced in. So that will essentially force your sauna ventilation to work as you want it to, and it will force the hot air to come down from your ceiling level when that's mechanical. You can do gravity-based as well in your electric sauna, but just know that it won't work as well as it will with mechanical exhaust. Then obviously you need to intake the air from somewhere. So we have two types of sauna heaters. We have UL listed sauna heaters that have the UL safety listing here in the USA, and then we have non-UL listed sauna heaters. So UL listed sauna heaters have something called high temperature sensor on the bottom of the sauna heater. And why do they have this kind of sensor that monitors the internal temperature of the sauna heater? After all, this sensor does not exist in my home country, Finland, at all. So it's not for safety reasons. The reason is that UL requires sauna heaters to pass something called a towel test. So what this towel test is that they will put a towel on top of your sauna heater, so on top of the upper level of stones of your sauna heater, and if the towel burns or if it gets kind of like black, then it will fail the test. So this high limit sensor is essentially making sure in UL listed sauna heaters that the sauna heater will pass this towel test. So in case you happen to lay a towel on top of your sauna heater, please don't do that. But that's a concern in the USA apparently. So this sensor is keeping the heater in a kind of temperature that the stones on top won't get so hot that the towel would burn. That's why they have this heater. So when you have an UL listed sauna heater, what I recommend you to do is to have 2 intake vents. One adjustable intake vent here below the sauna heater, and you will just take a minimal amount of air from here to cool down this overly sensitive UL mandated high limit switch. Because if you don't do so, your sauna heater will turn off prematurely before your sauna gets hot. So you will take a little bit of air from here and cool down the sensor, but then the air that the people are actually breathing. So when you have a closed mesh sauna heater like this, or when you have a wall mounted sauna heater, if you really want an oxygen rich air to mix with your rising hot air, you will have an intake vent halfway up the wall between the heater and the ceiling, because the cold air coming from here will get heated on top of the sauna heater, and this oxygen rich air will mix with the rising hot air that comes from the heater. And how do we make sure that this second or your main intake vent doesn't turn into a window that would essentially just let the heat go out? So what we are going to do is that we are going to have a duct or like a pipe that runs up. So you have fresh outdoor air coming from here, and the pipe is running upwards and bringing in the fresh air to your sauna. Then you will have the small adjustable vent, like super small here, just for the UL sensor under the heater. So because when this pipe here runs up, then the hot air is always going towards the top of the sauna if you don't mechanically force it to go down. So then what happens is that basically the lighter hot air doesn't want to go down because it's lighter than cold air. That's why air balloons stay on the sky. So having this basically incoming like pipe that brings in the fresh air from outdoors run upwards ensures that the ventilation doesn't turn around. So with UL listed sauna heaters, here you have your drying vent on the ceiling, drying, and then you have few levels of benches. Here's your one bench level and here is your second bench level. You have your main exhaust vent under your food bench, and if possible you want this to be mechanical. If you don't have it mechanical, if you have a pipe running up like this, it will probably still work. So then you will have air rising here, boom, 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 and then it will go down and get out from here. So this creates nice circulation and equal temperatures and will make the air move inside your sauna when you have an UL listed electric sauna heater. When you have a non-UL listed sauna heater, so we have these home sauna heaters, and these are not listed with United Laboratories or whatever that UL stands for, then you just need an intake vent halfway on the wall, or you can even have intake vent on the ceiling as long as you just make sure that it doesn't turn to exhaust vent. You can even have it here on the ceiling, but you can have just one intake that drops the cold air towards the sauna heater like this. Then you have your drying vent, and then you have your exhaust vent. And if this is gravity-based ventilation, so we have two types of ventilation. Ventilations mechanical, so you will have machine running this vent, or then gravity-based, which means that you are trusting the gravity to do the job. So with electric, we always recommend this to be mechanical, but if you can't do that, then you will have just gravity-based, and you will just hope that it works as it should. But this oxygen-rich cold air that gets dropped to the sauna heater, it will rise up with the hot air and go out from here. And as said, this will be just for drying. So this is what you do when you have a non-UL listed sauna heater. If you would have a freestanding sauna heater, so not a drop like this, but just like a freestanding sauna heater like this, something open mesh like Home Hive, we will put a picture of Home Hive right here, then you could in theory bring the intake air from next to the heater from lower down or from halfway, somewhere here, because the airflow in these open mesh freestanding sauna heaters towards the floor is much more pulling compared to these kind of like wall-mounted sauna heaters. So if you would have home hive, like we have a picture here, then you could bring the intake air actually from the floor, as long as you bring the vent close enough so it gets mixed into the airflow. So the main concern with all ventilation is that you want the fresh oxygen-rich air get mixed into the airflow, so it flows through the sauna and you have great oxygen levels and great airflow. But with a wall-mounted sauna heater like this, one vent here, then drying vent here, and then this one should be mechanical, so it forces the air out. And we will get to vent sizes later in this video, by the way. Next we will cover different types of ventilation, so I will draw you a ventilation for each case. Let's take a green pencil. Here we have an integrated indoor sauna with UL listed sauna heater. So you have one vent here, cooling down the sensor, adjustable vent under the sauna heater, one vent either halfway through the wall or in the ceiling above, and this will drop the fresh air to the sauna heater. You will have duct running up, then you will have one drying vent here and one mechanical exhaust vent here, and you will have the air flowing through the sauna. So that's with the UL listed integrated indoor sauna heater and with a wall mounted sauna heater. So if you have a freestanding sauna heater like this, you can think if you can bring in the fresh air from the floor to the airflow of the heater. So you need to think about that case by case. Next we have integrated indoor sauna, non-UL listed, or in case UL has fixed their listing. So as I said, here intake, here drying, and here exhaust, and mechanical. So we want this to be run by a machine in optimal scenario, and air will be flowing, nice oxygen rich air flowing through the sauna. And when it comes to like integrated indoor saunas, the main consideration compared to other saunas is that you want to really make sure that you bring fresh oxygen rich air to the sauna and you exhaust the air out of your house. You don't want it to stay in your house and damage your house. Then if you have an indoor sauna structure, UL listed mechanical ventilation. So you have mechanical vent here. You again have the same gist. You just need to worry when you put your integrated indoor sauna structure that where the air is actually coming from and where is it going. So where is it going? That's the main thing when you have indoor sauna structure UL listed and mechanical. And basically the same with non-UL listed, but just again forget the vent, have it like this one. Mechanical optimally, and air will be running like that. Then when you have an outdoor sauna room, the nice thing is that your air will always going to come from outdoors. So it's oxygen rich, low CO2 levels, and it will always be going to outdoors. So this is why outdoor saunas are more simple. But otherwise, here we have a UL listed sauna heater. So my advice is once again the same as before. And non-UL listed, just same, just with outdoor saunas, you don't need to worry about where the air is going or where is it coming from, because it's always coming from outdoors. So here we have an outdoor sauna with wood-fired heater. And with outdoor sauna and wood-fired heater, your ventilation is always going to be phenomenal. And why is that? The thing is that the wood burning inside your fire chamber is basically acting as a mechanical exhaust vent, because wood burning brings air into the fire chamber and then exhausts it out from your sauna. So essentially you have something pulling the air in close to floor level, which is awesome because the hot air wants to always go up, as we have talked many times in this video, so it will get pulled down and go in there. So how do you ventilate a sauna with a wood-fired heater? So you want to have two intake vents and both adjustable so you can experiment with it. Basically where you have an exhaust vent with electric heaters, you will have an intake vent here with wood-fired sauna heaters and another one right here above it. So then you can experiment which one brings the best oxygen-rich air to combustion and also to the wood burning itself. So you are going to build both of these vents and then you will experiment which will create better airflow. Then you will have just a drying vent. So drying vent here, drying vent. And let's say again you have standard sauna, benches here and here. This is your food bench, this is your bench where you're actually sitting at. So the air will come from, fresh air comes from here. Some goes to the fire chamber, some mixes with the rising hot air, or then it comes from here, some goes to the fire chamber, some mixes with rising hot air, and then you will have oxygen rich air going up, first up, boom, 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 and then it will go from the fire chamber outside. So this is why wood-fired saunas typically have better air than electric saunas, because they have always mechanical exhaust ventilation. So the next obvious question that you have now when you understand where you actually should place your intake and exhaust vent or vents based on your unique situation is how big should your sauna vent be. So now we will talk about sauna vent sizes. Firstly, we will go over how the vent should be if the air is exhausted directly outdoors. Then we will go over how the vent should be if the air is exhausted into the ventilation stack. And lastly, we will cover why is the exhaust always larger than intake vent. If the air is exhausted directly outdoors, so exhaust vent should be 46.5 square inches and intake vent should be approximately half the size of the exhaust vent. Then why is the exhaust vent always larger than the intake vent? So this is due to airflow dynamics. Hot air expands and rises, so it requires more space to exit the sauna effectively. If the exhaust vent were too small, it would restrict the escape of hot air, leading to poor air circulation and discomfort. Then if the air is exhausted into a ventilation stack, so you have an indoor sauna, the intake vent should be 4 square inches per person, or at least, so minimum 12 square inches in any case. The exhaust vent should be 5 square inches per person, or at least 23 square inches in any case. So you want to think how many people are going to be in your sauna at maximum at once, and then you can calculate based on these numbers how big your intakes and exhaust should be. Exhaust is also always larger than intake vent due to pressure balance. So a larger exhaust vent ensures that there's no excessive pressure buildup inside the sauna, allowing fresh air to be drawn in smoothly through the intake. Larger exhaust than intake vent also creates efficient ventilation, so the size difference ensures that air flows freely from the cooler intake vent to the hotter exhaust vent, which maintains a comfortable and safe sauna environment. So essentially, this will make sure that your ventilation doesn't turn around and your exhaust vent doesn't turn into an intake vent and other way around. So lastly, I will give you some special considerations. So we have open mesh sauna heaters. So essentially this is an open mesh sauna heater, and then we have closed mesh sauna heaters, or closed basket sauna heaters. So this Harvia Virta here is a closed basket sauna heater as an example. So why does this matter? So if you have a closed case sauna heater, you don't want to bring in the air. So this is a very typical mistake. People bring in the air from side, so somewhere from here, and the fresh air coming in just hits the side, plummets, and goes out from your exhaust vent. So then you have fresh air just hanging in here with this closed case sauna heater. So in these heaters in the US, these are UL listed. So you just want to make sure that the fresh air that you bring in, whether you bring it from the floor or from above, I recommend that you have both. And this vent is again just for cooling the sauna heater, and then this is for bringing in the fresh air for bathers. But whether you bring it from here or here, at least you don't want to bring it from right next to the sauna heater, from the midway when it's like closed case like this. Because the airflow that these sauna heaters create, it's a little bit different compared to an open mesh heater like this. So when you have an open mesh heater, you can bring in the fresh air essentially from the midway or even from somewhere here on the bottom, because this draws the air in more effectively because it has an open casing like this. So it doesn't matter if you put the intake vent here, as long as it's very close to the heater, or even if you put it to the floor, as long as it's very close to the heater, because you just want to get the fresh air to mix with the rising hot air. So this is the difference between having a closed case or open mesh sauna heater. I'm not saying that open mesh sauna heater is different. I'm just saying that with closed case sauna heater, at least you don't want to bring in your fresh air like midway here, because then it will just hit the side, plummet to the bottom, and possibly all your fresh oxygen-rich air will get out from here, and you will have no great air on the upper levels of the sauna. Then when it comes to whether you have UL or non-UL listed, like wall-mounted sauna heater like this one, the airflow these create is typically not as strong as with something freestanding open mesh like this. So even if you would have open mesh wall mounted, it doesn't create such a strong pull from the bottom here. So this is why I like to bring the fresh air from above, and also the Finnish construction guidelines written in 2008 for professional builders like to bring in the air from here for the people to breathe. So this is one consideration. With wood-fired sauna heaters, the important thing is that you ensure wherever your intake vent might be, if you have intake vent here, you don't want all your air to be going from here to the fire chamber and out, because then you again have high levels of CO2 here and no oxygen. So this is a matter of experimenting, and that's why I recommend having one here and one here when it comes to intake vents for wood-fired heaters, because then you can kind of experiment, because air pressures around your sauna cabin or sauna room are always going to differ. But you just want to make sure that all your best air doesn't get out through the fire chamber. So I'm just going to verify that you understand, so that the intake opening shouldn't be too close to the fire chamber, because otherwise the fire chamber is just throwing all the air into the fire chamber and out, and no oxygen to breathe, sad sauna goers, high CO2 levels. Then last very special thing is that we have these embedded wood-fired sauna heaters. So you embed your fire chamber through a wall and you load it from a room next to the sauna. Like cases you need to treat the wood burning sauna heater's ventilation just as if the sauna would be electric sauna, because the fire chamber that is drawing in the air is not magically going to draw the air through your wall. So in these cases, when you have a wood-fired sauna heater that is loaded from the adjoining room or from the space next to the sauna, you need to treat the ventilation as if it would be an electric sauna heater, because your mechanical exhaust vent is just mechanically exhausting air from your other rooms, your adjoining room. Then lastly, extra considerations, so a few things for ventilation duct materials. So avoid plastic and elastic piping in a sauna, as it will deform in hot temperatures. And install a protective mesh to keep out the rodents and birds from entering the sauna. So if you have an outdoor sauna, you don't want to just build a hole and then make nothing to cover it, because otherwise you will have animals and such entering your warmer sauna room after your sauna going or whatever. So you want to install a protective mesh to keep all of those birds and such out from your sauna. Or if you really like having birds in your sauna, no, I'm not talking about girls, but like actual birds, then maybe you shouldn't install that. But yeah, so that's a basic introduction for getting your sauna properly ventilated. Think of it as living creature that needs to let off steam. And if you get the ventilation right, the rest of building your sauna should be relatively no sweat until you get into your sauna. That is. If you would like to learn how to size your sauna heater correctly, you can watch this video from me where I will teach you how to size the sauna heater for your sauna.